I got goals to chase, I got roads to pave. Not yet where I wanna be, but I got close today. I went ghost today, I got least to say. I've been focused on these dreams like I didn't sleep today.
Hello, Relikks Squad. We have a special guest
Very
today.
special.
A lot of people know him, but I think a lot more people don't know him, but they should. His name is Steve Menzie, and I'm going to get him to introduce himself as well and tell us a little, but he runs the Expo, the Sport Card Expo in Toronto, twice a year and out west. So he's a big deal in the hobby community. But Steve, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and why we think you're important.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. First of all, I mean, nice to be considered important in circles. I feel important at home. It's great to be here. I always have a certain level of discomfort with these things. I'm past the imposter syndrome, but because I didn't come into this space as a hobbyist, but I've used that to my advantage as much as possible. You know what? I've always been in and around Toronto except for a period of about 10 years when I lived in Southern California. And I've been mostly in the sponsorship, sales and marketing and the event business. While I was in California, I met and got working with Mark Burnett before Survivor and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of my foray into events, and through a long circuitous road that you probably would bore you to hear all of it. I found my way to Fan Expo, who I'm sure most of you know from this space. And I used to call that the biggest space probably the biggest show you've never heard of. From that, I ended up running that with Amon, the founder, who many of you may know from being in the sports space. And we got to the point where that show was back in 2011. We actually ended up having to meet the fire marshals of the facility, and they said, we can't allow you to do this unless you take the north building. So we were trying to figure out how we would do that. And Amon, because he started in sports, had the idea to bring sports back into it. And that was my first exposure to any kind of a sports card show. But we went up and met with Al and saw his show. So so I'm not a natural hobbyist, but I've come to enjoy it. As I learned through Fan Expo, I appreciate people having passion about anything. I'm particularly passionate about adventure, outdoors stuff mostly, but I've enjoyed this very much, and I'm excited. It's been a real deep learning for me, and that's one of the things I kind of live by is just try and stay sharp, try and learn new things, try new things, and that's been what this has been for me.
Funny enough, we just had a guest on, Carlos from Sluggers, and, unprompted, gave you a huge shout out because we were talking about the National, the Expo, all that, and he was saying, Steve kind of took the Expo to the next level and always adding on and, making it better and better. So just wanted to add that in there. You just got a huge shout out, not even being on the show.
Well, I appreciate that. And you know what? I said I'm not a hobbyist, but I think that has served me well because I didn't come in thinking that I knew everything. I mean, I know events and I know what I know, but I also know what I don't know. And so, the first things I did was to really listen, talk to people, see what they wanted. There were a couple of really easy, low-hanging fruit kind of pain points that dealers had that I changed up. Like the show used to go to like 9 o'clock on Friday night, and it was real difficult to do move in and stuff. So I just made things. So you've got some quick wins with the dealers, and and if you know Al Sinclair, the founder and previous owner of the Expo, he could be a bit prickly at times. Endearing in his own way, but so I've just taken a different approach. And there have been guys like Carlos and so on that are. There's so many guys in this hobby that have been around forever, and they're so passionate about it, and I just love hearing that, love hearing stories, and love learning. So. Carlos has been one of those guys, and I meet somebody better each time. Not better, I mean, I get to know people better with each show, and and most people are really willing to share knowledge and experience. So I've been lapping that up like a thirsty tree.
Steve, you've been doing this obviously now for a little while, sports cards specifically. Brushing aside the blip of COVID, obviously having an impact on anything in the event space. The industry itself is having such a resurgence, and there's so much demand for sports cards, and obviously the show has expanded as a result. But are there any things you can sort of point to and say, wow, like this is just like so over or so beyond what I thought it would be, whether it's the amount of vendors, the values of cards, the amount of attendees? What sort of surprised you the most with the resurgence of the hobby?
Yeah, you touched on a few good things in that point. A lot of those did. I mean, I still am, mind blown by the value that people place on things. But I don't. I used to say this about Fan Expo. I said I don't get it, but I'll take it. And and I mean, I don't share it, but I appreciate it, if you will. But I'll go back to the first thing you said with COVID. It was a blip, but it was the single biggest loss for me in this hobby, and it was the single biggest win at the same time. What it allowed me to do, and for many of us who run our own businesses and so on, there's a common saying that we work too much in the business and not on the business. Mm-hmm. And COVID was a forced chance for us, or for me, and certainly I'll speak to make a concerted effort to understand the hobby better and to really look at the business and what could I be doing differently. And it was a big punch in the gut that just said, hey, you might not want to be 100% vested in in-person events. So one of the things that I did through great support from some of the guys on my team was I did the virtual events. And that was great for the brand. It was great for helping me understand collector behavior and just knowing how guys deal. And I was super impressed with a lot of the guys and some of the guys you might not expect that would embrace something like that really did. Everybody took it on. They're passionate about it. And it kind of led me down a few other rabbit holes in terms of, what are the pain points for collectors? What are the collector behaviors? I mean, I literally did a few things. I mean, I started doing white glove grading services where I was, flying to PSA and Beckett to, every couple of months to do grading. I bought a Fujitsu 7160 scanner, and I started scanning collections to see whether, because I can't believe, as an example, how many collectors don't have inventory of their collections. And so most people, if they have any insurance at all, are underinsured. So I started thinking, is there opportunity to digitize collections? And so you're seeing a lot of those other kinds of services, the plethora of new services like ComC, and not just selling platforms, but apps like the Market Movers app, or Ludex and Center Stage, and some of those things that are really enhancing the collecting process and experience, as well as recognizing the inherent value of it. So all that's been a really great deep dive for me. It's helped me understand it better. And I've even doing, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but as part of what I said during COVID was I don't want to be 100% focused on physical shows, because those can go away in a second. And as many of you know, I've started to look at other opportunities, whether it be something as basic as having showcases and so on for dealers to rent and make the show look better. While it's a great part of it, I don't love that. Literally, there are guys that hang shower curtains as in their booth to kind of demarcate their space from. So I love looking for and bringing in other ways for dealers to kind of jump into the 90s, as I like to say, in terms of learning how to retail and to merchandise. So those have been important. And I think they're a big win for everyone, but there's also the things that I need to look at that take me out of my comfort zone. Things like just more affiliate marketing, and where and how can I be growing my brand beyond the 8 days a year that our run shows, are now 10 days with Edmonton as well. But that was kind of a long-winded, circuitous answer, but hopefully I addressed some of what you asked for.
No, I definitely think that's, because a lot of the hobby community doesn't know how any of this stuff operates, right? They don't even know who runs these shows or anything like that, right? So Just a little bit of an insight in that is amazing, right? Like people think these shows, huge shows, just kind of run themselves and dealers kind of show up, but a lot of prep. 6 months, 6 months goes prep into these, right? Like to each show more or less, right? So
It's interesting because, again, post COVID, as I say, it was like falling out of bed, in that anybody could, and in many cases have put on shows, because it's not difficult to rent a space and sell tables. That in and of itself is not. But to do it year in, year out, I mean, what I'm most proud of is the work that came before me on this. This expo prior to COVID had been twice a year since 1991. So, and I always tell people, it's after the National, it's the biggest show in the hobby, and I think a lot of people underestimate that or write it off as just a hockey show, and even that has changed. But I'm really pleased with and now proud of the reputation that the show has, and yeah, I'm working hard to continue to grow that. It starts for me from listening to the dealers. I mean, sponsors and collectors are of course important, but I think if I do what's best for the dealers, that it makes the show strong.
On the topic of dealers, Steve, do you find that there's like the choir singing the same song, in the sense of like this is what the dealers are asking for more of, or is there any sort of like consensus in the sense of, hey, do this more often? Or, one thing I thought about was, why isn't there a show that's specific to industry that isn't generally for like the public, right? Like a summit, like a talk of sorts, that's just for, people that are in the business. Do you find that there's like one common thread amongst dealer demands of you?
No, I mean, apart from the obvious one, how can I get a corner closer to upper deck or closer to the entrance? It's that's definitely the most common. I mean, I do get a lot of people, and it's been even pre-COVID, to say, look, I think that we could sustain a third show. And I've considered that for a while. And when I first started, I did consider, all right, well, maybe down the road there's an opportunity for a show, and what other markets could there be? Because we had been through a similar exercise with Fan Expo and expanded into Vancouver and Edmonton, and so on. And I wondered, can the same thing be done here? But then a lot of people were and still are saying, can we do a summer show? So I've thought about that. We added a show in Edmonton last year, so that was it was more localized, a regional demand for that, but that was pretty common. I wondered that as well. What I tried to do with Fan Expo was to bring in more of a similar trade thing that you mentioned. It didn't really have a lot of traction, but in this hobby, kind of the same thing. And two things happened last year. Well, one of them has been going on for a while, but the industry summit has been going on for quite a number of years. And I can't tell you who the owner used to be, but Beckett bought that a number of years back. And I just got back from that. That was in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. And that does a pretty good job of being exactly that, being a place where the hobby, the industry, people in the hobby get together and connect, as well as with mostly dealers, but some sponsors and basically companies that are vested in the space. So that's been strong. The only other thing would really be it still is very transactional. Many guys are always looking it's all about buying and selling, and that's why I from a business standpoint, I look at that and say, how can I facilitate that, and how can I gain from it myself without competing with my dealers? So again, if I as I mentioned earlier, I want to do what's best for the dealers without eating their lunch. So it's that basic, but it's true, and it seems to work. Where the future of this is going is a bit more difficult to say, but I feel that there are enough people that are passionate about the expo. It's built into the zeitgeist of this hobby, and everyone has it on the calendar. And I'm pleasantly surprised by how many, and I learned this through COVID, by how much this hobby means to people as part of their personal and social communities. So that's the importance of that was not lost on me, and is not lost on me. So that actually, I think, helps me appreciate it, make it a better experience. And recognizing that, I try and build that piece into it. So I know how much work dealers put into prepping for this show each twice a year. So
For sure.
for sure, yeah.
I'm just thinking here as you've mentioned you're not a hobby lifer, right? And I have a feeling you've got some sports cards though. Do you have? What are some of your big sports cards? Not even being a collector.
Well, I mean, interesting, and I'm, as a kid, I watched hockey with my dad and my brother, of course. Growing up just outside of Toronto, but I had a bit of kind of as many kids do, I guess, a bit of an FU time with my dad, and I was kind of the anti. I liked what my dad didn't, so he was at least fan, and I became a Habs fan. He liked Gordy and Bobby, and I certainly did learn to as well. But I would, then focus more on Habs again. But lost my train of thought there. There was something I wanted to say on that. But so through COVID, I met a few collectors that reached out to me and asked me to do some grading for them. Then a couple of guys in particular asked me to help them buy and sell some cards. So as I was looking for cards for them, a couple of cards, I said, "Hey, are you interested in this? It seems to be a good price." But, yeah, it's not really what I want. I want a Gretzky, but I'm looking for a 9. And so the first card I bought for myself was a Gretzky 8, an OPG rookie. So that was a pretty good card, and I got it, at a good point in time relative to. So I've had some good appreciation on that, and I wanted to have an Or rookie, so I was able to get one of those. There's been a couple of situations where dealers have offered me trade instead of paying for booths, and I don't normally do that, but where even a guy like me that knows it's a good trade, then I'll take it. I picked up a nice Ronaldo card at the Montreal Expo last year that I'm actually quite excited about, and I had it was graded authentic with the auto, and I had a graded, so I put a numeric grade on it, and came back at 10, so I got a little lift on that. So yeah, I mean, I don't really know what it is relative, but I have a small collection in terms of number of cards, but I tend to gravitate towards more of the historic stuff. I bought at the National last year. I bought a Jesse Owens card. I love more of the athletic stuff. I like the Gary series, especially some of the non-traditional sports cards. So yeah, and then occasionally I picked up a couple of cool signed memorabilia pieces. I'm not a wall hanging kind of guy, but yeah, and I've got 4 or 5 bottles of Keon whiskey that I've been tempted to open, but Keon signed whiskey, but I haven't yet. So that's a lick.
Yeah.
You just mentioned a couple interesting things that I didn't, necessarily realize. Because of your position within the hobby and you running the expo, you kind of have collectors, vendors approaching you for potential help or insight. And do you ever find yourself playing matchmaker? Are you ever connecting vendors, dealers for large transactions, especially during the downtime, right? During the off months, is that sort of part of the role that you play within the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not even something that I anticipated, but it came to, and that's a big part of when I said earlier affiliate marketing. I get a ton of inquiries, and I used to kind of joke that I literally would get maybe not one a week, but an email from somebody. My husband passed away, and I've got this. I don't know what to do with it, or we're getting divorced, and I've got these things. I just want to liquidate them. So again, I don't want to compete with my dealers, but I do want to facilitate that. And where there's an opportunity for me, great. But when I talk about affiliate marketing, that's really how can I leverage what I have, and my biggest asset is my dealer and collector base, and just connect buyers and sellers. And if I can move that, that's ultimately what the show is. I'm a landlord at the show, and I run a big mall, if you will, a few times a year. But if I can, fans are fans, and collectors are collectors year round. So I tell my sponsors that, and I try to have relevant content for them, and people are looking to buy and sell all the time. So if I can facilitate that, or grading, or any other services that collectors value, then great. So yeah, I'm also always looking for those opportunities, and there's been more and more of them all the time, and there's a definite trend towards who and what kind of thing. It's not just widows and divorcees that are that are reaching out. It's now more investors or people that are it's kind of the people that are coming back into the hobby from COVID, et cetera. So
no, very interesting. Because I imagine you are like almost like a one-man army in the sense of a marketplace, right? You have the unique insight into both sides of the equation, the buy side and the sell side. So I always wonder, Relikks, for example, we've been the fortunate beneficiaries of having, a few estates approach us and say, hey, like, just to your point, hey, I'm downsizing, or I'm moving out of country, or there's been a death in the family, and we have a storage unit full of sports cards, and we don't know what to do with it. And we've just been in the right place, right time, and have been able to sort of, cash people out on that. But I always wonder, and this is just like a one-off scenario for us where we're being the beneficiary of that. But in my head, I'm like, there has to be these situations arising more often than once a year or once every 2 years that we get to see insight into it. And I wonder if that's an opportunity for you and the Expo and, LCSs like us that are not, operating just for, obviously we love the Expo and we're a presence at the Expo, but we run a business 365 days a year through our local store, and are always looking for obviously unique opportunities to better our inventory and better our offering to our customers. So here I am hamster wheeling on, hey, how do we potentially work with the Expo and you beyond, that twice a year, on-site presence?
And that's a brilliant thing, and it's a very obvious thing, and that's why I say in terms of working on the business. I mean, what are the important elements of your business? And the thing is, for me, it's always been. I mean, even pre-Fan Expo, I was in the apparel industry, and I always look for influences, and I look at other industries and other companies to see what do I like about what they're doing, or what do I find interesting, even if I don't get it, or I'm not into that. There's still a lot of things you can learn from different brands, and a lot of things that apply. So I'm not looking to create my own marketplace. I mean, I created an app pre-COVID with the intention of having a marketplace component, but for a bunch of reasons, that portion of it went away, and I've since developed a very strong relationship with eBay in that sense. And I mean, as a show promoter, I need to be agnostic in that. I want to have the best possible show. Everybody in the hobby needs to be there. So I can't play favorites with one auction company or one card manufacturer. I mean, just given the Canadian market, the card part of it has obviously been more of an upper deck marketplace, but I'm looking to change that over time. So I need to keep. I need everybody in the hobby to be there, and to still be able to work with everybody, but to keep that piece of it alive. But there's some really exciting opportunities around the affiliate space. Again, I mentioned that because one of the things I looked at, I would get this mailer at home, and I live in the Bluffs area, which sort of Scarborough, and I would get this mailer every once in a while, and it was you've probably seen it as well. It's a 3 or 4 page fold out, but on glossy stock, and it's a company, I think they're out of Montreal, that sets up at banquet halls or whatever monthly, and they say we buy gold, we buy diamonds, toys, collectibles, all those kinds of things. And so that's just an example of something that what if I were to do something like that, or what if you as an LCS said, hey, we're going to do flyers locally and say, this Saturday, bring us your stuff. We're going to have some appraisers come in, almost like an antique roadshow kind of idea. Come in, we'll do an open house, bring your stuff. We'll give it an appraisal for you because, it doesn't cost anything. So that's when it got I didn't do it because it got a bit political around how to manage it. And frankly, just the space, a whole other space issue that I don't want to get into right now, but, it's a good problem, but it's one that I'm dealing with. But that's the kind of thing that you can do. I mean, when people tell me, I get a lot of people ask if I buy cards. I said no, or can you help me find out what this is worth? And I said no, but if you come to the expo, you've got 300 people that are going to give you, you'll get a range, but you're going to get a very real world uh, a sense of what that is worth or isn't worth. So
Yeah,
I think
no,
it's
very
a smart
interesting.
place to.
I haven't heard of that Montreal company, but you know, we internally at Relikks, you know, are actually going to be launching some campaigns in the coming months that are strictly focused around, you know, us buying. So if you ride the subway, watch out for that.
Okay. And I don't even, and maybe I'm not allowed to ask questions here, but the name Relikks, I don't know the origin of that. Like, how did you come to?
You are allowed and you are encouraged to ask as many questions as possible.
I mean, we threw around a bunch of different names when we were first starting out and came up with this idea. I think ultimately, you know, the word relic is synonymous with collecting, right? It's like the rare gem, the rare treasure hunt that you're getting in the collection. But the true answer on it is, we wanted a single word that would live online and own its brand and identity. We wanted relikks.com as a domain. We wanted all of the social handles to be one single word. We wanted it to sort of roll off the tongue easily. So ultimately, we decided on Relikks because all of those properties were available for us. You know, the digital strategy of this business was very much on the forefront of our thinking when we first launched the LCS. Granted, we're obviously a brick and mortar shop, but our digital presence is super important to us. So that word sort of stuck with us in the sense that we can own all the online properties, and it had clear meaning within the hobby. It wasn't just like a random word that we sort of came up with. So that's the origin story of Relikks.
Okay. It's good to know. It makes sense, and especially with respect to something that you can own. I mean, you look at so many tech companies these days, and it really started in my mind with Yahoo, you know, and not creating a word, because the word existed, but it wasn't one that was really owned, and yet it's owned, it's trademarked, and you know, so there's a lot of equity that you can get in a brand and in a name. So that's always an interesting challenge.
Steve,
yeah, and I see.
I'm gonna ask
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, finish up. If there was anything.
Say, I mean, again, creating 300-400 dealer signs each year, I see a lot of names that you know, some that you know are cute, and I understand it. Others that I think, what are they thinking? And and others that think, wow, that's yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, obviously Expo coming up. Give a couple of pieces of advice for Can you hear me? Expo's coming up. Give a couple of pieces of advice to, because we're going to have a lot of people different, you know, watching this, and, you know, maybe we can get out before the Expo or for the next one, but a couple of pieces of advice for people attending the Expo to have the best time possible, and a couple of pieces of advice for vendors, because a lot of vendors are new, right? You know, it's exploded. So a couple of pieces of advice for vendors to have a good time and, you know, successful as well.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting because I tend to gravitate towards in that kind of thing, the things that it doesn't matter if you're selling cards, collectibles, crayons, you know, or pantyhose, right? Because you know, there are basics about retail, and I always suggest to people, where do you like to buy things? You know what? And I say, maybe it's not even like, get out of the hobby for a second, and you know, if you're into to clothes or albums or even food, like, where do you like to buy? What is it you like about the retail experience? What is it you like about? Do you like the hunt? Do you like the search? Really be. Do you like things priced? Do you like them not priced? Do you like a situation where you can haggle or not? Like what? I think so. Understanding that, making it easy for people to know what you've got. So from a dealer perspective, be approachable. I mean, and that seems obvious, but it isn't really. Again, it's. I don't want people to change who and how they are, but and again, a lot of these guys do it on their own. But you don't have to be eating a hot dog in your booth and, you know, spilling mustard everywhere. Just be clean, be approachable, connect with people. Yeah, and that's everyone's individual styles, and not everyone goes to interact with people, but be ready to engage, have your stuff well organized, and yeah, it's compounded a little bit with this expo because in the last 3 shows we've been in 3 different halls. So there's a lot of people are excited about going back to 5 because people are very familiar with 5. And I will say that the floor plan is similar, but it's definitely not the same. Everything is different. There are a lot of very exciting retailers, and you guys are a great example of that have come into the space post-COVID. And I think everyone can take a page from your book and that from some of the others. And so with this expo, and this is a note that will work for both collectors and the dealers, we have Hall 5, which we used to have, but Hall 5 I lost 5% of it to a permanent food court that's in there. And the hall we were in June had 25% more space. So I'm trying to cram, and it's impossible. So this show has Hall 5 and Hall 4. And so in terms of the collector experience, explore, spend time, plan to spend more time there than you would. I'm trying to facilitate that in terms of having, I'll have an app that has the floor plan and the dealer list downloadable and searchable. There'll be physical signage there of the floor plan, dealer lists. There'll be 11 by 17 printed copies of the floor plan. That's it. But yeah, it's all about exploring. It's about better. I'm trying to do a better job of aisle sign markers, just the wayfinding pieces, and encouraging people to go in different places. That's my job. I mean, as I said, I've got to if you go back to my real estate or my mall analogy, I've got to get people not just to the to the Starbucks there, but I've got to get them into every corner of the mall and the different ways to do that. So I've really looked at creating some more content that's important for me. My first experience at the expo was when we were looking to potentially to do it at Fan Expo. Was not a good one because, again, not being a hobbyist, I didn't appreciate that the content was the vendors. The content is looking through $1, $5 boxes, which has changed. But to me, I don't want something that's just transactional. Not every part of the expo should be transactional. So one of the things I like best about Comic-Cons is the Q&As that they do with the guests. Every single guest that's signing at Comic-Con does a Q&A. And I think they do a world of good for the experience of the consumer. And I think at the end of the day, I think that the guests, and make more money when guests do that. So, I spent money and I committed to doing a stage and having Q&As, and I got Bobby Hull to do the very first Q&A ever, and it was great. And so I'm always looking for additional content. We all recognize how important it is to have new people into the hobby. We know about wanting to get kids, but how do we attract others? We do a good job of getting the collectors, but how can we get more fans? So a couple things. I'm just trying to do other new things. In November, you'll see an area where we've got a really awesome table hockey free play and tournament area, which is cool. I mean, it's one of the best quality games that there are, and that'll be kind of neat. We've got some of the top, and there are organized leagues. Wouldn't surprise you guys, but some of the top players there that you can play against. I've got a motorsports pavilion that's going to be there. There's literally going to be 2 F1 show cars on site. Wow. And with all kinds of race worn and signed gear from Hamilton, Verstappen, like literally all the guys. So it's about experiencing everything, and I'm seeing more crossover pop culture brands. Like there's a guy who's been doing the last 2 shows who sells new Nikes, Jordans, and everything else. And there's more and more artists, and the hobby is definitely a lifestyle, and I'm trying to leverage and encourage the pop culture side of it in addition. So it's just experience more of it, take more time, walk around more, and I'm on our team trying to make the experience easier and facilitate that part of it. But I need to. I don't want to sound too much just on the experiential. I've got to. We're 3 weeks out, and I haven't released a floor plan yet. So that's been because of all the the new space and wanting to make sure I get this right. It's taken me longer than planned, but I'm very excited. It's going to be probably again I've said this the last 2 times, it's the biggest show yet, but this will be the biggest show yet. So I want it to be a great experience and continue to both honor the guys that have been there forever, but also celebrate the guys that bring new energy, new product, and stuff to it. So
I'm going to email you the floor plan right after this podcast, demanding the floor plan. Come on, where is it?
I wanted to ask one more question before we
in the essence of time and all that. I think people want to hear this. You've been running this for a little bit now. What's the craziest situation you've ran into? Like, was it somebody stealing a card? Was it somebody shitting their pants on the floor? Like, what's the absolute craziest situation you've had to deal with there? And I'm sure, the demographic that shows up to the expo, I'm sure it's been pretty crazy sometimes.
It has. I kind of it takes a lot to phase me, and I've seen a lot of stuff that would probably be good answers to that, but sometimes it takes me a little bit to think. I mean, I've got some neat and fun stories, and just trying to manage the audience. Yeah, I mean, we've had fests, not many, which is great, and I like that the community really looks out for each other in situations like that. I've learned what to watch for. My team has, we're doing a better job with getting security and uniformed police there. So that's been there, and that's the other side. That's the dark side of the hobby that unfortunately exists. But I've seen it. I go to other shows quite a bit, and it doesn't seem to be a big problem, but it's something I'm certainly aware of. When I was running Fan Expo, we bought the show in the Comic-Con in Dallas, and with Comic-Cons, there's a lot of cosplay, and a lot of guys and girls dress up, and and you see guys with 5-foot long swords and or Master Chief with full on body armor and and plastic AKs and stuff. And we were doing the show in Dallas, and the police said, "Hey, we have to have a weapons check, a props check here." And the irony being that you could open carry an actual pistol into the event, but you had to get your cosplay prop checked. So that was just a bit of a holy crap moment.
God bless
I just want to, yeah. But this hobby is there's a lot more commonality between collectors in Canada and the US, and then the whole political piece. So I can get past that. One of the funniest things, we had Ric Flair there a couple of years ago, and he brought a few of his robes and stuff with him. And I don't know if you guys know Brian Gray. You probably do, from Leaf Cards. And Brian he's full figure guy, by his own admission, and he pulled out one of Rick's pink sequined robes in the green room, and was dancing around doing his best Ric Flair impersonation, and we have a video of that somewhere. That was just an absolute hoot. But there's a lot. At the end of the day, it makes me think that this is a hobby and a business built on passion. And I tell my team that, I said, "Look, guys, literally, we're not curing cancer here. So we're here to facilitate. Yeah, it's a business, but it's a business of people pursuing a passion. So let's keep that in mind and make that the focus. Once in a while, passion can cut both ways, and that's kind of the stuff you don't want to deal with it. But I'd rather have that than a bunch of boring, uninspired people around." So
you
talk about
So, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm not gonna call anybody out. There's no one story in particular where I have to throw somebody in the bus, or where I can share a name or anything. But
you just did. You talk about content being king. I want to see that. I want to see that Brian Gray video.
Oh well, Brian. Yeah, that's in a good light. I think he'd be proud of that. All right, maybe I'll send you that video, and you can include a still from it.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for making yourself available, man. Really appreciate everything you've done with the expo, and by extension, obviously you've done for the hobby. We're obviously a fairly new LCS, only being around a couple of years, and when we did our first expo, we were just blown away by the scale of it and by the amount of foot traffic that was going through it, and obviously it just gave us more confidence in the fact that this hobby and this industry still has a whole lot of attention and a whole lot of demand, and to your point, it's a very passionate base.
Yeah.
So thank you,
So
man.
thank you, man. Thanks for making yourself
I
available.
and I
Thanks for coming on the pod.
taking the time to welcome me on, and I love being able to talk about it. I love creating this space for you and for everybody that's there. I appreciate the energy that you guys are bringing to the space, but yeah, I see there's still things have plateaued for sure from where we were 6 or 9 months ago, but I still see a lot of growth in this space, growth and improvement of the experience and of all elements of it. So I'm excited, happy to do my part, and I'm excited for November and excited for the next few. So
we'll see you at the expo. Send us the floor plan, man. Come on.
Bet you will.
Come on, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you,
All right.
and enjoy the rest of your little mini vacay before we all start attacking you for 100 different reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Give me a little morning.
Yeah.
See ya, buddy.
Cheers. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Thanks, huh?
Thank you.
I be